Hey guys, you are listening to episode 7 of the show, and to open up today, I have some pretty exciting announcements to share with you guys. So, prepare yourselves, buckle up, and let's get started and cue that intro. Hi there, people. It's Bree here, back for another episode of this awesome pop culture podcast. Now, I know it's early, and we're literally only seconds into the episode, but before I say anything else, and before we dive into our comic update and get into our awesome review for this week, I have some really cool things to tell you guys about the show, and some adjustments that I made to it in the past few days. And I hope these changes make the show a little bit better for you guys, and maybe overall more likable, I guess. That's what I'm really going for here. So, let's get into the new stuff and the announcements. Okay, so first things first, some of you may have noticed that I have changed the name of the show, and obviously this is pretty much the biggest change that I made and the most obvious one. So now, instead of A Piece of Everything, which was the old name, the show will now be called Comics and Whatnot. And the idea to change the name of the show to Comics and Whatnot, it really just hit me one day, randomly. Like, I was thinking about it, and I just feel like this name better reflects what I'm aiming to talk about on the show, which is comics, but not only comics, but also comic-related stuff and things beyond that. Like movies, shows, novels, whatever, which, you guys already know that, but I feel like at least having comics in the name, better portrays, like, in a nutshell, what we'll be discussing instead of A Piece of Everything, since, if you don't know anything about the show, A Piece of Everything could literally be about anything at first glance, so, yeah, and I figured if we're going to change the name, we might as well just do it now, while there's not that many episodes out, and that way it won't feel like as big of a major change as it would be if there was a lot of episodes out and I just changed the name. So, yeah. But the only thing about having a new name is that episodes 1 through 6 will have me introducing the show as A Piece of Everything. Which, I'll try to address that in the descriptions or whatever, but that's the only thing. But, other than that, yeah, from here on out, we are now Comics and Whatnot. And you know what? I think that deserves a bit of an applause, so give it up. Oh, yeah. Yes, so that's super exciting and cool, and overall, I like it much better, and I think it's a great fit for how the show's going to start to look once we get some more episodes in. So I look forward to using the new name. I'm excited about it. And actually, speaking of more episodes, that leads us super conveniently to our next adjustment on the podcast, which is that instead of having a weekly status, which I have not been keeping up with, obviously, I switched it up to bi-weekly. And yeah, of course, when you think about it, that's kind of sort of what I've been doing anyway, since I'm late in making episodes all the time. So this is just making it official. So it's not much of a change. But now that the podcast will be having a bi-weekly status, that's just going to make it a whole lot easier for me to get content out actually on time, instead of keeping you guys guessing every week as to when a new episode will be available. So that'll definitely end up working in our favor moving forward. But yeah, other than the name change and the bi-weekly status of the show, that's pretty much it for announcements. But yeah, I just want to let you guys know that I'm really excited. And I'm feeling good about the tweaks that were made. And I hope, especially with the title change, that it encourages more people to listen to the podcast. So yeah, just keep those two things in mind moving forward. Okay, and so now that we've gotten that done and out of the way, we can jump right into our one and only weekly comic update. Alrighty, okay, so first thing up for the update, we gotta talk about Hawkeye. Okay, it's been out for a couple weeks now, and it is finally out and streaming on Disney+, so that's really cool. Okay, so what do I think of it so far? And just keep in mind, when I'm saying everything that I'm about to say right now, I've only watched the first 2 episodes, so I know that there's 3 episodes out now, so I haven't seen 1, and by the time this goes up on, is available to you guys, the 4th episode will probably be out too. So when I say this, I'm only talking about the first 2 episodes. I don't know anything else, but yeah, what did I think of it? So with the first 2, I'm not going to lie to you guys. To me, it seems pretty slow as of right now. I mean, some things have happened, but nothing that has really stuck out to me as being, like, great, you know? And I was a little surprised that it feels like that even after having, like, a couple of episodes that were, like, almost an hour long each. And I know that the other Marvel shows have done this too, but we all know that, you know, that's a super long time for a singular show episode, like for a regular show. And still nothing has really gone down yet, so I'm not sure if that's good or not, since there's only going to be 6 episodes. I looked it up. There's only going to be 6 of the entire show. Which, you know, all of the other Marvel shows have pretty much also been doing the same thing. Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki have only also been 6 episodes each, and WandaVision had 9 episodes. So it's not like an alarmingly low amount of episodes compared to the other shows already. Plus, if every episode of Hawkeye is that long, which, you know, I think they are, you never know. A lot can happen in an hour. Things can take an exciting turn. So, yeah, I have to watch the 3rd episode to see about that. But I just feel like Loki and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that they started off with a little more of a kick in at least the first couple of episodes, and was able to reel you in more than Hawkeye has done for me this early on. So I am curious to see where it's going to take us, though. But honestly, I just have my eyes peeled for Yelena Belova to show up at some point. That's really my one thing that I need to see here. They've got to make that happen. We're all thinking it. I know we all are. But yeah, so Hawkeye is now in progress. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from here. So yeah, that's Hawkeye. And jumping off from Hawkeye to another MCU thing, I was finally able to see Eternals, guys. Yes. So, my thoughts on it. I thought it was okay. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I remember I had said in a previous episode, it might have actually been the last episode actually, that I had heard average things about it, and that's kind of what I think it lives up to in my opinion. Average, you know, it's okay. I'll have to admit it was interesting. I will say that. And of course, it has a different feel from the classic Marvel stuff, which we all know that. And different types of characters are now being introduced, like Celestials. That was very interesting. And I'm very intrigued to see what role they're going to be playing down the road into other movies and stuff. But yeah, I'll definitely go deeper into like what was in it and more of what I thought about it in a separate review. But I finally saw it, so that is an accomplishment. I'm very happy about that. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say about Eternals. Just the fact that I saw it, and I think it was good. But moving on. I already know what we're all thinking about, and what we've been thinking about for the past, like, half a year. And, of course, that would be none other than Spider-Man No Way Home. And, of course, let's get to the countdown, because, you know, I love doing countdowns now for this. So, as of today, which is the 7th of December, we only have a mere 9 days left until opening night on the 16th. Oh my goodness, it's so close. I can, like, taste it. And I don't know if you guys have tried to get your tickets yet. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have, because, you know, that was the big thing. But if you got them, big props to you, because at exactly 12 o'clock on the day the tickets went on sale, which I'm pretty sure that was not yesterday, but last Monday, apps were crashing, the ticketing websites wouldn't load, and I stayed up till 12 o'clock just to check and see how it would be, and it felt so hectic and stressful, even though I wasn't even the one getting the tickets. Like, just trying to get the app to load, it was so stressful. But I am going to see it on opening weekend, and it's going to be hot fire. I'm so excited. And I also know it's going to be packed with people, like, out the wazoo. I can already see it. It's going to be so packed. But I'm kind of excited for that, though, because, you know, with getting the crowd reactions again for another big, like, blockbuster movie, that's going to be so exciting. So I'm really happy for that. But still, I highly encourage you guys to also try and see it on opening weekend, just because it's going to be so hard not to run into spoilers after the first weekend of the movie being out. It's honestly going to be impossible. There's no way people are not going to be screaming it from, like, I don't know, rooftops, I guess. But, you know, if spoilers bothers you, then that's what I would recommend. It happened with Endgame, and it'll probably happen with this too. So, yeah. But since Spider-Man is coming out super soon, that's definitely when our next show is going to be on. So that means the reviews on, like, Eternals and Shang-Chi and stuff are going to get pushed back a little bit, which I think is worth it because we have to talk about Spider-Man as soon as it comes out. So, yeah, that's just a little heads up for you guys on that. So, yeah, that is... Oh, wait, nope, that is not all of the stuff for Marvel in our update. There's one thing that I just found out. I think it was yesterday or two? No, yeah, it was yesterday. So yesterday, it was announced officially by, I want to say... Oh, no, yep, by Marvel Studios. It was announced officially by Marvel Studios that Charlie Cox will definitely be returning as Daredevil sometime, and I am so happy about that. It's so exciting. And I feel like if they're saying that, that kind of confirms in my mind that he's going to be showing up in No Way Home. I don't see any other way they could have put it, because if they're saying that right now, this close to Spider-Man, then I feel like that's just them giving up on trying to conceal it. And also based on how Charlie Cox has reacted to all of his interviews, that was enough for me anyway. So this kind of just adds more onto it. So I'm so excited to see him to return in some way, shape, or form as Daredevil. I'm hoping it's going to be in the form of a Disney Plus show, because I would just love that, and I feel like that would be handled super well. But yeah, I had to mention that because that's just so exciting. So yeah, that's super new news that came out, I think, yesterday at some point. So yeah, keep an eye out for Charlie Cox, people. That's going to be so cool. So now that is it for all of our Marvel stuff in our update. But however, there's just one last thing that I wanted to mention before we get to today's review. Okay, so let me just say, November went by unrealistically fast. I feel like we all felt that. It just was non-existent. But the awesome thing about that is December's here, and that means we'll be getting the Book of Boba Fett at the end of this month, so that's super exciting. And that will start streaming on Disney Plus on the 29th, so the very end of the month. That's, like, really the end. But, you know, that's, like, 20 plus days. We can handle that. You know, if we've waited for Spider-Man this long, we can handle 20-something days. And yeah, it's exciting because the last Star Wars show we've waited for weekly was The Bad Batch, and that feels like it ended so long ago. I want to say sometime, I don't know, a few months ago, something like that, I guess. So yeah, we need something to fill in those voids in our Friday nights and get those weekly cliffhangers started back up again. So I'm super happy we can now say that it's coming out this month. And, you know, just think about it this way. It brings us one step closer to the Kenobi show and another step closer to the Ahsoka show. And that's just going to get crazy once those shows come out. So, yeah, that is another thing to look forward to in December. So we have Spider-Man, and we also have Book of Boba Fett. So Marvel and Star Wars. What's not to love about that? And, yeah, that brings us to the end of our weekly comic update for this week. So that means we are brought right into our top-notch review of Under the Red Hood, which I promised last week, and not even last week, that was 3 weeks ago. I'm sorry, last episode. And I'm super excited to talk about it. And before we start, let me just say, I will be spoiling this movie and what happens in it. So I highly recommend that you'd have watched it first before listening so it doesn't get ruined for you. I know it's a super old movie, but, you know, just saying for the new people out there who haven't watched it yet. So yeah, just a little warning before we dive in. But guys, this movie is amazing. I love it so much. And I actually watched it for the first time only about a year or so ago. And I have watched it countless times since then because I'm now kind of obsessed with it. I really am. And it has easily climbed into being one of my favorite DC animated films. I will say it. It's true. It is just that good. And believe it or not, this movie came out 11 years ago, almost 12 years ago, in 2010, which is completely nuts because it has aged literally perfectly, to the point where, like, someone new, like me, like a year ago or so, new to DC, can watch it 10 plus years later and still love it. So that's an accomplishment in itself. But in general, though, I feel like all of the older DC animated movies are, like, the best ones, in my opinion. And in that, like, almost 10-year ago range of movies, we have, like, Justice League Doom, the Flashpoint Paradox, and, like, The Dark Knight Returns and stuff. So, I mean, not to say that the newer movies stink or anything, but it's just that the older ones aren't my favorites. But if you're not familiar with this one, like Under the Red Hood and the story that goes behind it, in a nutshell, it's basically the continuing story between Batman and the second Robin, Jason Todd, after he was killed by the Joker, which is the famous scene that they open up with in the film. And Under the Red Hood is basically how he comes back, you know, as the Red Hood. So if you're going to be watching this for the first time, I would recommend that you at least know who Jason Todd is. And that may be a little obvious, but if you come in completely blind to not knowing that at all, you might be a tiny bit confused in certain parts. Nothing too unmanageable, but still. And of course, they explain stuff as you go. But just to get more background for the story as a whole, I would recommend reading at least Death in the Family, which is written by Jim Starlin. And this comic is super well known for what happens to Jason in it. It's pretty well known in the DC comic, you know, verse. And it's pretty much a precursor to the Under the Red Hood comic, which is also top-notch in my opinion. And that's written by, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing these names, but I want to give them credit, so let's try it. It's written by Judd Winnick and illustrated by Doug Manick, something like that, Doug something. But yeah, I love that comic. But we'll definitely be talking about it throughout the episode, since the Under the Red Hood comic is very, very, very similar to the movie, so I'll be mentioning that. But if you feel inclined to, I'd also say to read that before the movie if you get the chance. But keep in mind, you don't really have to. Like, when I came around to watching the movie, I don't believe I had read the actual Under the Red Hood comic yet. But I had read Death in the Family, and having read that, it made the movie just that much better. It was amazing. And then, after reading Under the Red Hood comic and coming back to the movie, it became an even better experience having watched, you know, and being able to compare those two in my mind. So, that made it even more enjoyable. So, yeah, that's just a little heads up if you're new to the story that's unfolding here and the comics that it's based off of. But if you have not seen this film yet, please do yourself a favor and watch it. It's top notch. It's so good. But here's the question. Just what makes it so good? Well, you know what? That's a great thing to ask. And to start us off with answering that, can we just talk about how much Black Mask made me laugh in this movie? I just want to mention this first. He's so funny. He literally screams 85% of his lines. It's so funny. I really liked him in this film. He was awesome. And it was kind of interesting the role his character ended up playing in the end in Jason's major scheme of things. Because in the beginning, his gangs and stuff are getting wrecked and messed with by the Red Hood. But in the end, Jason explains that, like, the whole idea of him tampering with the Black Mask and his operations was to get him so desperate that he would get help from the Joker to try to get rid of Jason. And I honestly did not see that coming. That was a really cool twist. But then when you think about it, that means that Black Mask really did get caught in the crossfire between Jason and Batman and, you know, Joker's unfinished business, basically. And I think he actually says that, too, some point in the movie. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that Black Mask, you know, I just wanted to mention him first because he was hilarious to me. And I had to vent out my appreciation for this character. He was awesome. So, yeah. Okay, now that that's off of my chest, let's get to the real first thing that works for me in this film. Okay, so let's just talk about the animation of this movie for a second. Because usually when I do a comic review or anything like that, I mention the artwork first. And really, the artwork for an animated movie is its animation. So that's how I think of it, at least. But I gotta say, I really miss this type of DC animation style. I really do. Because now that we're in what's essentially a new era of DC animated movies, we've been getting a different look to the movies where it's like a lot more outlined, where you can actually see the like lines around people and objects, which I have to get used to that. It's like you can see pencil marks, but it's not pencil marks. It's, just lines around everything. And it's more blocky and less fluid moving than how it used to be. And that's fine. I mean, I actually liked it for the Long Halloween animated film. I just watched part 1 the other day, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good. Because in my mind, it kind of reflected the comic art style that was in the actual Long Halloween comic with David, is it David? Nope, Tim Sale, sorry. Tim Sale, and I forgot the other guy. I can't remember if Tim Sale's the writer or the artist, but, Jeff Loeb. No, yep, Tim Sale did the art. So yeah, I feel like the new animation reflected Tim Sale's artwork, so that made it go down better for me. And even the color scheming was really nice, where it felt dark, like it would in Gotham. And, the same thing for the Red Hood, too, under the Red Hood. And I loved how you can get an accurate feel for Gotham through just looking at the colors and stuff. But yeah, the new style is fine. I don't hate it, but it's different. And some people may prefer that, I guess. But I kind of wish they had just kept it the same style as under the Red Hood. That type has always just worked out best for me. It's just a lot smoother looking and better reflecting of the comics, in my opinion. So yeah, that's just my feeling about the overall styling of the animation. I love it. I just love it in this movie. It's simple, but still yet perfect. It's still perfect. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. But speaking of the animation, actually, one thing that I feel DC always seems to get right with their animated stuff is the fight scenes. Yes, definitely. And honestly, that's just a given, because that's their forte. DC knows how to fight. So because of that, the battle scenes here were just bomb. They were so good. And there's just something about them being animated that makes them look so fire and so cool that I can just never look away when I see one. So I just love how they do them. And especially any of the ones that ever involve Batman, because Batman fights like a boss. And, because Jason was trained by Batman, he also fights like a boss too, and they're in all the fights, so that makes them all fire quality by default. But looking back though, there were so many great battles in this movie. You have Batman and Nightwing versus Amazo in the beginning, and also basically anytime Nightwing shows up, I love what's going on anyway. It was just I just love it. But it was a really good opening to the movie, that fight with Amazo. And a really good thing about the type of fight like this is that since it's animated, it has so much freedom in the effects. Like, you can quite literally do whatever you want here. So in that fight, you have like Amazo repeatedly getting blown up by batarangs and Amazo like tackling Nightwing in midair. It's so cool, and you can never go wrong with things getting blown up by batarangs. That's the first thing about it. And then pretty much in the same fight, you have the first Red Hood chase between Batman, Nightwing, and Jason. And this is also a great one too, because it's really what makes Batman suspect that the Red Hood is Jason. One, because of all of the crazy ways he's able to counteract his moves, which was amazing just to watch. It was pure artistry on the screen, just like having him being able to just go around everything that Batman throws at him. Like when he cuts Batman's line rope thingy before it wraps around his legs in midair. That was a big hint to Batman that it was Jason. And two, because he discovers later on in the Batcave, after doing some bat editing, as I like to call it, the Red Hood actually calls him by his first name, Bruce. And that really is what catches his attention. That's the biggest hint you could get. Because even though Jason's fighting moves are super impressive, Batman still says to Nightwing, like, this is nothing we haven't seen before. But once he realizes that the Red Hood knows his name, that makes him, like, stand up and knock his chair over in surprise. And it's very hard to surprise Batman, so that's one thing. And it immediately makes him think of Jason, And really, as it's portrayed in the movie and in the comic book as well, Batman really knew the Red Hood's real identity before Jason physically revealed himself. So by the time they have their last big fight at the end, Batman is not fazed at all when Jason pulls off his mask or when Jason takes off Batman's mask. And that makes sense because Batman is the best detective ever. He can figure stuff out. And I actually really like how they had him figure that out relatively early on in the whole scheme of things. So, I mean, it just totally matches the character. So that was really, really great. Loved that fight too. And also the fearsome Hand of Four fight. That was kind of the fearsome Hand of Four fight was also awesome with Batman and the Red Hood beating them up. And now you can really tell by this point that Batman knows he's fighting with Jason because he actually steps in to help him. If it was anybody else, he probably would have stepped in to take all of them down. If it wasn't Jason, he would have taken the Red Hood down too. But I just loved their dynamic here because Batman's not totally buddy-buddy with Jason because of how rogue he's gone, but he, still cares about him, and he's willing to help him because he was, his partner. So yeah, the fight ends with Bats and Jason completely dominating the fearsome Hand of Four, which was super cool to watch. But even though they win, Bruce still can't really side with Jason because he ends up, killing one of the people they fight, and that gets him upset. And Jason says, you should be happy I only killed one of them, which is true because he gets pretty brutal, and so, yeah, he should be happy he only killed one. And he says, you use fear against people, but what do you do with the ones that aren't afraid? And then he says, I'm doing what you won't, I'm taking them out. And when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, he really is not messing around. But comments and standards like that is what ultimately drew the line in the sand between Batman and Jason and, how he used to be and what he became. And I feel that those differentiating views of justice and doing what needs to be done is brought out super well in both the very last fight with Batman and Jason and then the Joker eventually. And that's first of all, that has to be my favorite part of the movie, by the way. It was so epic. But we will get into that. We'll give that its own breakdown time later on. So we will talk about that. But yeah, that and also the flashbacks, too, also gave really good insight into their different ways of looking at how to go about justice. And, oh, man, I loved those flashbacks. That's a whole other thing. And they honestly just made me more sad, especially seeing the ones when Jason was, when he was little, a kid. Because he was so happy, and he was just loving the Robin life. You saw him, going crazy over the new Robin suit and messing around with the Riddler and stuff, all of that. But then in the other flashbacks, you progressively see him getting more harsh and brutal. In that one where he just rams into that random guy's collarbone and breaks it. And that exact scene is in the comic, too. I remembered it as soon as I saw it. But when Bruce tries to, reprimand him about his, harsher actions and stuff like that, Jason responds by saying, it was dumb, but that doesn't mean he didn't deserve it. And I'm pretty sure this was said in the movie, but it was definitely in the comic when either Bruce or Alfred said... and that's when that's when Bruce realized that Jason Todd was not Dick Grayson. And everybody knows that Dick Grayson is the coolest dude. He does not go, hard on people. He's awesome, and he's kind. But seeing, Jason start going down that road, Bruce knew that there was something different and dangerous in him that just was not in Nightwing, because Nightwing's not dangerous like that. And his behavior in those parts, it makes it easier to believe that Jason would turn into somebody who would take people out instead of just putting them down like Batman usually does. So when he asks Bruce towards the end of the movie, did the Lazarus pit just turn me this way, or is this just the real me where I start, killing people? It's made just that, it makes it just that more thought-provoking because... Sure, on the one hand, the Lazarus pit could have changed him and made him a little crazy and tipped in the way that he acts. And I mean, he did come out of there not looking too good. You guys saw it. He was, screaming, and he was just not in a right state of mind coming out of the Lazarus pit. But on the other hand, he was already acting edgy before he died. So I feel like, in a way, that they make it up to the fans to decide that, and it's more for the viewer's interpretation, more or less, whether the Lazarus Pit or just Jason made him, start killing people. And I personally think it's more of Jason's personality than the Lazarus Pit, but I feel like different people can think about it different ways. And especially since there's not a set answer for that, as far as I know, at least, either in the comic or there's not a set answer that's leaned more towards in the comics or in the movie or whatever. But yeah, all in all, I loved these flashbacks, and they added so much to the story for me, like just another layer of Batman and Jason history that I never knew I needed, but I do need. So I just loved those. They were great. But actually, going back to the Lazarus Pit thing for a second, and this is just one last thing I want to mention before you move on to other things about the movie. Something I appreciated about the movie was how they had a different explanation for how Jason came back to life than the comic book did. And I would even say that it's a simplified version than the comic, because the comic itself was being tied to a lot of different things at once. It was being tied to Infinite Crisis at the time, because Under the Red Hood was taking place at the same time as that comic event, which I hadn't known that, but that's kind of cool. So that was factored in to explain how Jason came back to life. It was a whole thing with, like, Superboy Prime changing reality and all that stuff, so that was a whole thing. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a whole thing. You have to read, like, the whole Infinite Crisis shebang to, completely understand that. And obviously, the movie could not bring Superboy Prime and do that whole comic explanation, because there is no Infinite Crisis in the DCAU. So if they went by directly what the comic had said, it wouldn't have made any sense whatsoever. So I noticed how a lot of people prefer the Lazarus Pit explanation as opposed to the Superboy Prime reality-altering explanation. And it's definitely a lot simpler, so it works for me. But I also think that Jason's comeback was, I think it was retconned in the New 52. I haven't read it, but I think it was, to the Lazarus Pit thing for the New 52. So the movie was probably just going off of that, but I appreciated how that was done. And the Lazarus Pit itself was explained pretty well when Ra's al Ghul was talking about it with Batman, so props to him. I also liked how Ra's was in the movie in general, too. I liked him being in it. And this time, it's very rare, but he actually wasn't the bad guy here. And the thing about him was he actually felt bad for Jason's death, being kind of directly his fault, because it kind of was. And that's why he put Jason in the Lazarus Pit in the first place. And, it was kind of his fault, because every sane person knows you never hire the Joker for a job. That's just common sense. No matter how many times this happens, people always try to hire the Joker. It doesn't work out. And even Black Mask does it later in the movie. So, yeah. But anyways, back to the Lazarus Pit. But yeah, even for someone who's new to the concept of the Lazarus Pit or has never heard of the Lazarus Pit, they would have been able to follow in some way or the other how somebody who was killed could show up again, through that. Because all of us DC fans know that if a character dies, they're coming back. There's just no way around it. They're coming back somewhere down the line. But yeah, that was just a cool thing I noted about how that was explained, and like the whole other, how they kind of went a different way than the actual comic for this one, just to make it easier to understand, because that would have been way too much. Okay, yeah, that was all the stuff I wanted to say off the bat, no pun intended there, for things I loved about the movie. And it pains me even to bring this up, but now we have to get into our what didn't work so well segment. So let's just cue the sound effect and get this over with. Okay, so, question. We get that the movie's top-notch, fantastic, stupendous, all that jazz. But was there anything in it that didn't work out or turn out so good? And my answer to that is a big fat no. Honestly, guys, there's literally nothing about this movie that I didn't like at all. I can't think of anything. And I know that sounds like impossible because, of course there has to be something that you don't like, but I'm serious. I couldn't think of a thing. There's nothing I didn't like. But now if we're talking about if there's any burning questions I still have by the end of the movie, that's a different story, because I have just one burning question. And that would be, before the Red Hood that is Jason Todd shows up, who were the other Red Hoods that we saw in the movie? And by that, I mean, for 3 seconds total. Because, at one point, there was a guy with a tux on and, a fishbowl-looking container over his head that was red that we saw very briefly in a flashback when Batman and Jason were in that, warehouse. So I'm assuming they were both there when the flashback moment actually happened in real time, because Jason was memories. So I think that was something they were both remembering. But then in the Batcave, we saw another glimpse of a few different Red Hoods too, in an old newspaper headline or something on the Bat computer. But I still don't know who any of those people were or what the other Red Hood scheme was. I know it's explained in another comic somewhere. The only thing is, I haven't gotten around to reading it, and I also don't know what comic it's in, so that might actually help if I knew what comic it was from. But, I mean, it's probably also a nod to the Death in the Family animated film, too, since that's supposed to be before the Under the Red Hood movie, timeline-wise. I can't confirm that, though, because I've never watched it, since it's one of the rated R ones. But still, I would have liked to have known a little more about the other Red Hoods that were alluded to a little bit. And I know it was mentioned a little bit that it was something that the Joker was in on, or came up with, something like that. But other than Nightwing and Batman talking to him about it directly, and the 10-second flashback we got of the dude falling into the chemicals in the warehouse, that's pretty much all the info we got about it. So I could have maybe used some more background for that detail, but it really didn't take away from the movie itself either way. But maybe I'll be able to find and read the comic on that someday. That would be nice, so I can finally discover what that is. Yeah, but I still don't know the answer to that question, who the other Red Hoods were, or anything like that. But if I do eventually find it, I will let you guys know, because that is a whole other quest I have to do. But yeah, alrighty, people, the moment of truth has finally come. It is now time to talk about the ending of Under the Red Hood. And let me just say, man, it was so sad. It was so sad. It really was. When it ended, I was like, man, I gotta go about the rest of my day on. It really sticks with you, though. It's super, super well done. And as I was saying before, the last fight between Jason and Bruce is my favorite part. And it's really funny because clips of this part keep showing up in my YouTube recommended, different pieces of the same scene. And I've liked it about 7 different times on YouTube. I just love watching it. And the reason why I love this fight so much, and I love it the most, is because there's quite a few different parts to it. They start off on the ground in Crime Alley, which is so symbolic because it ties so much to Batman history, and that's where he found Jason in the first place, which they mention. But during their battle, I love all of the tricks and gadgets they use against each other to try to take each other down, because they're so similar in nature. And it's so obvious just by the way that they fight how well they know each other, and how much of the moves they know, and just how alike they're thinking in terms of how to fight and stuff. With everything Batman does, Jason counteracts it, and vice versa. And that's so cool to watch. But I think the best part is when Batman, shows him up. Once they fight in, that small abandoned bathroom, he literally just smashes him into walls and just hammers at him. It's the coolest thing. I love it. And it sounds so violent, but it's really not. But it's so cool, though. But, when push comes to shove, Batman is always on top. He can't be beat, so he gets Jason there. But then after that fight is over, the combat hand-to-hand fight is over, and Batman kind of puts Jason down, the Joker comes to the scene. And one big reason why I really came to appreciate this finale of an ending is because we get Batman's explanation as to why he refuses to kill, because that's really Batman's trademark. He doesn't kill people. And we also get Jason's explanation as to why he's now willing to kill. And I think that's the thing that had me thinking, like, way after I had finished watching this, just, like, thinking about this part. Because, well, throughout the entire movie, we had gotten Jason's view as to why he started killing people. He would say, that crime in Gotham can basically only be controlled from the inside, and that it can't be eradicated like what Batman's always trying to do, but it can only be controlled. So more of a mindset of you have to kill in order to get rid of killers. That's Jason's viewpoint of it now. But then at the end, you get the scene where it's Jason, the Joker, and Batman, and Jason is hammering Bruce with the question. After all the terrible things the Joker has done, and he even brings Barbara into it, because he says, like, all the friends he's crippled. So he's talking about, like, he's bringing up examples and stuff, which is the big guns, by the way. If you bring up Barbara, that's the big guns. But he says, like, after all the terrible things the Joker has done, why did you never just kill him? Like, especially after he killed me. Like, when all's said and done, at the center of the Jason Todd Red Hood story, it's them three. It's Batman, Jason, and the Joker. So he's asking, like, if, why didn't you kill him even after he killed me? Because I was your partner. And if he had killed you, I would have killed him for you. So, which is a tough thing to respond to. But Batman finds a way. He says, if I go to that place, I'll never come back. And it's a very simple answer. But what he's saying is basically the exact reciprocal of Jason's ideal. So, instead of it being, you have to kill in order to get rid of killers, Batman's thinking is, if you kill a killer, you are now a killer, and you become the very thing that you've been fighting against, and I could never come back from that. So, yeah, if you're still following, because I said killer, like, kill 3 times, I don't know. But, yeah, I promise it makes sense. So, this ending part just highlights how far apart they've gotten, but also how thin the line that separates them is. And now it's come to them, trying to take each other down and, like, talk each other out of their way of doing things, And it kind of makes your head spin, I guess, because it's, like, it's the exact opposite type of thinking, but it's, like, I don't know. It's crazy. But the part where Jason is this close, and when I say this close, my fingers are so close together. He's this close to ending the Joker. It actually had me biting my fingernails here, because I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. Well, actually, now that I feel like I'm talking about this, I feel like I read the comic first before watching the movie, because for the end, I remember feeling like I knew how the comic ended, and then I wanted to see if the movie ended differently. I don't know. My memory's so blurred, I can't even remember. But anyways, the ending surprised me either way. I remember that at least. And I'm kind of sort of relieved it didn't go the comic way for the ending, because that would have just been a whole lot more sad. And I don't know if I want to spoil the comic ending for you, because we'll probably end up doing a separate review for the comic book down the line somewhere. But let's just say it ended way more dramatically than the movie did. I'll just leave it at that. I'll let you, look that up or do whatever on your own to discover that. But the fact that Batman was willing to hurt Jason in order to prevent him from killing the Joker, it was another powerful, like, point towards how he still cares about Jason, and that he doesn't want him to throw his life away and become the likes of people Batman hunts, I guess you could say. And, I still wonder about why Jason decided to attempt to blow everyone up at the end, because he was the one who activated the bomb. Thinking about it, it was probably just to make it like an end-all be-all situation, where it was like, this is either going to end one way or another, with the Joker dead, me dead, or all of us dead. So that's probably what he was thinking. I hope I'm right, but yeah, I had always wondered that. And before the bomb actually goes off, Batman grabs Jason, so it's implied he's not dead, but his whole situation is still, like, kind of a gray area, because Bruce never finds him. And even by the end of the movie, we don't know where he is. And that's why everything kind of ends off on a sadder, like, unsettling note. Because, 1, we don't know where Jason is by the end of the movie. And 2, we're reminded of him before things went wrong, again, with another sad, innocent baby Jason flashback. And, he's not really a baby, but you know what I mean. It's another flashback, and it's sad. So, they really make sure those flashbacks get to you. Like, ending the movie on a flashback, that was sad. It gets at the heartstrings. But despite the sad ending and almost everyone getting blown up, and I'm sorry, I just have to keep saying that, blown up, I'm sorry, I still couldn't have thought of a better way to finish the story off than the way it was, ended. And I feel like this is your typical Batman-esque story ending. Like, nothing ever completely works out for Batman. That's just how it is. He doesn't have a perfect, there's never a happy ending to his stories, which is sad, but it's true. Him and Daredevil, nothing ever works out for Daredevil either. That's so true. But we're not talking about Daredevil right now, so never mind that. But still, it's true. They would be best friends. But anyway, yeah. Just to wrap up our review here, I'll just give my closing overall thoughts about this movie. So, okay. Overall, it's not really a, let's guess who's under the mask sort of story, not like a mystery, because we basically know very early on. It's kind of revealed to us towards the beginning. But obviously, if you had read the comic before this, you already knew the crux of the story. But looking back on it now, that's actually something I loved about this movie, is the fact that it really stuck to its comic roots. And even at some parts, it was exactly the same word for word as the comic, which was super cool to me. I don't know why, but I love that, because I could remember scenes from the comic book and also feel super smart about it, because I'm oh yeah, that was in the comic book. So yeah, it just made me more excited to watch it, I guess, knowing how similar it was to the source material. And it was which, I've done this before, it was I could pull the comic off of the shelf and follow along for certain scenes, what was being said, literally word for word. And they were just that alike. So I gotta give the directors and the storyboard people for this movie big props for, sticking to the comic and the source material really, really well, because that was awesome. And even so, with all that being said, I still believe that the comic book was better than the movie. And in my opinion, the comic book is super hard to beat, because it's able to have the room to include more things, And I mean, it's a comic book. There's no limits in length to what it can have. So there's people and certain things that happen that are not in the movie. If you guys know who Onyx is, she's in there. Deathstroke is in there, because Deathstroke is awesome. I'm so happy. He shows up for 5 minutes in the comic book, but he's, he wasn't in the movie, so that's a point towards the comic book. So Deathstroke is in there. It has nods to Infinite Crisis, like I was saying before, stuff like that. But still, I think the movie did the absolute best comic-to-screen adaptation it could have done. It was perfectly executed. It was as long as it needed to be. And it took us through all of these years of Batman and Jason history in over, a little over an hour and a half. And that was amazing about it. So, I'm pretty sure it wasn't an hour and a half. I want to say an hour and 43 minutes, but I feel like that might be wrong. I don't know. It might have been an hour and 10. I can't remember. But yeah, that was amazing about it. It did a lot of good things in a short time. So for me, in a nutshell, Under the Red Hood definitely counts as one of the best DC animated movies ever made. It's so OP. I love it. And I would totally recommend this to anyone who would care to get into DC at all. It's never too late. It's never ever too late to learn about Jason Todd. Or if you're already a longtime DC fan and you've already watched this, you know what? I'd recommend that you watch it again, especially if it's been a while. So it's just a great movie for everyone to watch. So yeah, that's my closing thoughts about this awesome movie. And I'm pretty sure that just about does it for awesome DC review today. So I hope you liked it. I know I had a blast talking about this because I love this movie. And if you did like it, I actually have a YouTube channel. So be sure to give this episode a like on the Comics and Whatnot YouTube channel. That would be so awesome if you did. It would make my day. So please do. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode in 2 weeks, because next time I see you, Spider-Man No Way Home will be out, and we will be talking about it next time I see you. So that's going to be so exciting, and I'll be writing that review as soon as I get out of that theater. So that's going to be so fun. So don't miss it. And if you're already liking the stuff that I'm putting out on this podcast, if you're liking the stuff I've talked about so far, what we plan to do, then, why not write an iTunes review about how much you love the show, or a review wherever you listen to this podcast, on a different forum, wherever. I know you want to, so please, don't feel shy. Just go ahead. And lastly, my peeps, if you would like to write a review for the show on a comic or for something comic-related that you love, you can send it over to our new email, comicsandwhatnotpodcast@gmail.com, and if you do, I'll read it on the show, so that's super exciting, and I'll give you a shout out, so who doesn't want a shout out? And yeah, as always, thank you so much for listening, guys, and remember, never ask Jason to take a picture with a crowbar. Bye!